The foundation of your life starts to shake, and it usually happens suddenly. From the outside looking in, it appears like nothing has changed. Everyone and everything is still doing what they always have. But there's been a change on the inside. Your inner truth and your public performance start to diverge in a subtle way. The parts you used to play start to feel empty, and the phrases you use start to sound strange. You have no idea why what was once a source of safety is now suffocating. An unseen inner crisis masquerading as lethargy, meaninglessness, or boredom is the precursor to a genuine spiritual awakening. Though existential, it lacks drama. According to Carl Jung, this is the first step toward individuation, when the soul, which has been repressed by the needs of the persona for a long time, starts to make its presence felt. Not with solutions, but with a discomfort that murmurs, "This cannot be all there is." It's not an inspiration, but a sacred discontent, a profound awareness that something fundamental exists under the surface beyond the stories you've been told. Amidst all the din, your inner world begins to fall apart. Your everyday life starts to unwind, revealing meaning. Yet in this process, a peculiar clarity starts to take shape. Your name is being summoned. The path to enlightenment is not a climb, but rather a descent into one's own shadow and the unknown. Light is not an issue at this time. It all starts at the dark threshold, when memory of one's own essence takes root and the ego starts to crumble. Truthfully confronting one's own internal disintegration, according to Jung, is the path to transformation, not pursuing ideals. Something genuine, not perfection or joy, but the initial breath of truth, starts to emerge in that collapse of false tranquility. Here we have the initial phase, the rupture. It is not when you're looking for solutions that you will awaken, but rather when the questions themselves start to shock your old self to its very core. Though subtle at times, the call is constant in its sincerity and demands your undivided attention. A frenzied inquisition follows the rupture. The second phase of enlightenment, searching, comes as a divine yearning. The spirit will not remain motionless once it starts to move. You keep turning to books, even though you start to wonder things that no book can really address. In an effort to find a reflection of the internal change that is taking place, you immerse yourself in teachings from all over the world, both ancient and modern. You ponder, write down, pray, and try out different rituals and ideologies. You go to seminars, look for symbols, and pay attention to synchronicities. A journey of self-discovery awaits you. This is stunning in its electrifying, unfiltered glory. The power of a single line of prose, the indelible mark of a dream, or the serendipitous nature of a meeting can make all the difference. You are not alone. Others have walked this route. Before you feel less lost, the seeker in you awakens in this realm. With a collective unconscious opens a gentle door. Unfortunately, a threat arises as people hastily absorb truth. When confronted with the soul's call, the ego can hide its true colors. A subtle conflict begins to erupt within as light begins to seep through the crevices. You are not weak. Rather, you are in the stage of resistance. Anxieties caused by the creaking of its ancient framework causes the ego to clutch more tightly. Its goal is to keep the peace, keep the boundaries drawn, and bring back the logic. The allure of the known is like a siren's song. Familiar patterns entice with the illusion of security. The familiar, though, is starting to seem stifling. The barriers you erected to keep others out have paradoxically become the precise prison your spirit yearns to flee. The ego does not readily give up, as Jung noted. Its resistance is motivated by fear, not malice. It hides in its habitual defenses because facing the unfamiliar would mean risking the survival of everything it has built. Your faith in the signs you formerly relied on is shaken. Wow, was that dream life? What did that coincidence signify? Possibly it was all in my head. Its defenses are doubt and skepticism. A still smaller voice, though, is barely audible over the din. No amount of refusal can change the truth now that the self has spoken. In fact, this is the journey's crucible, not its demise. Regression is not resistance. Rather, it is the conflict between dying and being born again. A part of you wants to jump, while another part is afraid to let go. You are drained by this inner strife. Both mental and physical exhaustion set in. The life you created and the one that is attempting to be born are competing for your attention. Feeling this way is very normal and indicative of being exactly where you should be. At some point, you give in not to defeat, but to the reality. The ego realizes it can't keep controlling anymore. Instead of a sudden epiphany, surrender is more like a slow, steady softening, a breath, a moment, or a subtle opening. And with this newfound modesty comes an effort to blend in rather than dominate. As Jung emphasized, awakening is not a linear process, but rather one that unfolds in spirals. After moving ahead, it turns around and goes back. Its only requirement is that you be present, not flawless. At this point, what helps is being more honest about your fears, clinging, and grieving rather than making more of an effort. You take control of it once you give it a name. And when you recognize resistance for what it is, a defense mechanism, not a predetermined outcome, it starts to crumble, not because you pushed it, but because you comprehended it. A door opens, leading not into light, but into darkness, after a protracted period of opposition. At this same moment, the unconscious begins to surface, not as a hushed murmur, but as a powerful, long-lost energy. The light that shone through was not divine clarity, but rather all that you had banished. The darkness crept in undesired. It doesn't ring a bell. It just shows up, carrying with it the whole catalog of what the ego has refused to accept. The rage you stifled for the sake of harmony, the sadness you buried so you could carry on, the wants you were told were embarrassing, and the wounds you attempted to heal through perfection. Its purpose is not to harm you, but to draw attention to itself. According to Jung, the shadow is. Everything that the conscious mind rejects is a part of it, but repressed thoughts and feelings remain. It patiently waits for the ego to relax its hold, and then it bursts forth. Rather than being a form of punishment, this encounter is sacred. Awakening is more like a spiral into depth than a stairway to happiness. And before it ascends, the spiral dips. You start to see yourself in the abyss, not the way you imagined you, but the way you actually are. Your once solid reputation starts to crumble. Words escape you, and your behavior unsettles you. You can see patterns that were previously invisible. This, however, is not lunacy. Rather, it is a breakthrough. The truth has been laid bare by the unconscious, and it will demand everything of you. Just your unfiltered presence. No instruction manual, no perfect solutions. Soul work is like descending into the depths of your own mind. It's a hardship. According to Jung, 90% of a shadow is gold. It contains not only shadows, but also the vitality you require for completeness. Imagination, power, instinct, and fire. All the qualities you stifle because they were too overwhelming, too risky, or too wild for you. They remain in this location, ready to be retrieved. So instead of killing the shadow, you face it head-on. Let it happen as you listen, feel, and let it. Something long forgotten cracks open at that very second. Yes, there will be pain, but there will also be strength, because you will have stepped down from the illusion and onto the truth of your own being. The bottom isn't the end. It's the entrance to all you buried to stay alive. The actual process of integration can only begin once you have walked through it. Very few people talk about this threshold, and even fewer have a firm grasp on what it entails. A dismantling, not a transition, characterizes the sixth awakening stage. Your former sense of self, the one you constructed through years of conditioning, success, identification, and performance, starts to crumble. Not suddenly, but painfully. As you go through life, the roles you had played start to slip. Your once fervent goals have lost their luster, and the dreams you've inherited seem empty. Even though a part of you wishes things were different, the enormity of this internal stillness is beyond your wildest imagination. People may still call you by name, and the world may go on as usual, but you'll no longer be able to put a face to the nameless, faceless stranger. Even your reflection seems distant in this strange language. While you're here, you're not really a part of it. You attempt to put into words, but they reveal more about the experience than the words themselves, because a spirit that has gone beyond its physical form has no vocabulary. Even though it seems like depression, this isn't it. Even while it makes you humble, it's not failure. A death of the spirit, if you will, because the soul cannot ascend when the ego remains dominant. This is the moment when the ego's illusion of control breaks, as Carl Jung described it. This empty room is more like a wound than a punishment. What seems like a lack of vitality is actually incubation, not emptiness. Something holy is about to take root here, thus the ground is being prepared. Not because no one loves you, but because you can't carry on with borrowed knowledge on the next leg of your journey, and that leaves you all alone. At this point, no one can help you cross the threshold. Instead of explanations, what illuminates the way forward is quiet, a sacred reorganizing silence that removes all pretense until just essence remains. Part of the process is experiencing feelings of disorientation and detachment. What the new you is designed to be can't be contained by the old you. Although it may appear like nothing is occurring while you are in the chrysalis, change is actually taking on beneath the surface. The mind is decomposing. The former self decays into dust, making way for the new self to grow from the veracity of its foundation. No need to hurry through this or force a fresh start. An ethereal cadence, one that moves in the depths of the soul's desire, is required. As a result, you learn to be patient and watchful as you wait. As you sit with the pain and breathe into the mystery, something begins to move. It is not a bang-bang revelation, but rather a soft murmur, an unanticipated breath, a glimmer of warmth in the midst of frigid weather. That is the first beat of your authentic self, not a return to your former self, but the beginning of your rebirth. Something starts to come together inside you once your old identity falls apart. It makes no bold proclamation, and neither does it arrive with a rumble. It takes shape gradually, almost undetected, as a result of your decisions, your silences, and your determination to stop betraying your own voice. You're not going back to your old self. Rather, a new, more authentic version of yourself is quietly making their entrance. In the seventh stage of waking, you don't change into a new person. Rather, you give shape to what has always been real. As time goes on, you realize that you can't put yourself last to get other people's acceptance. You have a new core that is strong but quiet. No explanation is necessary. All you have to do is start living by it. Your speech is more genuine. Your no's are free of guilt, and your yes are unwavering. A change occurs in your perspective on the world. Both external validation and rejection have lost their power to entice or define you. Belonging to oneself is something you are learning. The ego's role shifts from ruler to servant of a deeper self throughout this process, which Carl Jung termed individuation, when the unconscious and conscious minds merge. As you go deeper, you start to live from that place. You start to trust your gut more, and you start to make better decisions. You shift from being a bystander to actively engaging with life. You aren't as rushed to fix, satisfy, or prove anything. Just being yourself brings you peace, even when no one else gets it. Even though it no longer gives orders, the ego is still there, muttering and trying to get in. Distancing yourself from your training creates a sacred space, allowing you to make a new choice. From that place, genuineness can flourish, not as an act, but as an actual presence. You haven't completed it yet. By the very end, you'll have stopped acting. Your sense of self is liberated from the constraints imposed by external forces, and you are now moving forward from the inside out. Truth shapes it, and you own that truth, no matter how delicate or novel it may be. When the self comes forth, not to be impressed, but to just exist, that is when inner sovereignty begins. When one reaches this point in their awakening, they may feel an eerie tremor between their inner and outside lives. Rather of appearing as grand spectacles, synchronicities sometimes manifest as soft echoes, or instances in which the world appears to spin around and stare back at you. According to Carl Jung, synchronicity occurs when two pathways that converge not logically but emotionally cross paths, bringing together inner meaning and external events. In this enigmatic connection, the more profound language of the mind starts to surface. Now that you've stopped actively seeking them out, signals start popping up on your radar. A book opens to the precise paragraph that speaks to your soul. Someone you don't know says something that reflects an unspoken idea. Dreams and waking life are both shown by the same symbol. There is no need to be impressed. These moments do not offer answers or resolution, but they do suggest, subtly but surely, that your innermost being is starting to reverberate with the cosmos. This is real. It hits home. After disentangling from the world, the mind starts to recognize its oneness. Your view broadens and softens. You perceive things through a new lens. You alter the way you hear and hear. Less like a machine and more like a mirror, the world around us transforms. Nowadays, people pay more attention to dissonance than they used to, and harmony is seen as a form of hidden melody. These moments don't come from the ego. They happen when you give your undivided attention to the here and now. They don't appear out of nowhere, but rather as a result of harmony. That is, when your identity and your actions start to mesh. The world mirrors your inner reality when you're in that alignment. Instead of superstition, it's a conversation between souls. Patterns, poetry, and significant accidents are the new ways that the unconscious is expressing itself rather than being concealed. Being synchronous does not prove anything. It is just a coincidence. A holy nod from the unseen to the seen. It serves as a gentle reminder. Some part of you calms down when you put your faith in it. It's not that you have a clear destination in mind, but rather that you finally feel the presence of a greater force. Even though the road ahead may be twisted and tangled, you start to travel it with the peculiar assurance of someone who has been observed by the invisible. Something crucial starts to emerge at this stage of the journey, and that's where the focus is. It creeps up on you quietly, without making a fuss. A yearning to be heard by one's own soul is a hallmark of the 9th stage of awakening. When one goes through the shadow, lets go of their false ego, and brings their inner experience in a harmony with their outside synchronicity, a profound change takes place. You start expressing what is true rather than what is required of you. This gesture is understated and understated. It is not showy or dramatic. Its emergence is gradual, like the restoration of breath. When you're detained for an extended period of time, your speech patterns and level of silence alter. As you speak less, you find that every word is more meaningful. Rather than acting in a way that will make other people approve of you, you start to do what makes you feel good. Of course, there will be a breakup when you cease seeking approval to exist. Once you quit performing, not everyone will be able to identify you. Your candor may frighten individuals who have only ever known your filtered self, but the mask you formerly wore brought comfort to others. Relationships can become more tenuous or perhaps vanish completely. After you get over the first shock of this setback, you'll realize it was really a sign of alignment. What crumbles never hit home. The persona, or mask, that we wear in public is important, but should not control us, Carl Jung stressed. The emergence of a more profound sense of self occurs when it starts to crumble, not suddenly, but by gradual honesty. When something isn't humorous, you stop laughing. When your body stops nodding, you stop nodding temporarily. Apologies no longer fill the stillness. Some part of you now hears the static of self-betrayal hum more than before, and you will inevitably trip and return to the old script. As it becomes worse, that's when you know you're making headway. The soul now demands consistency and no longer lets distortion go unchecked. Your external environment starts to reflect this new reality when you respond to that call. Discussions go more in-depth. Artistic endeavors gain significance. Not because you actively sought them out, but because your frequency is suddenly crystal clear, the proper individuals start to discover you. Living a life that doesn't demand performance is what it means to express oneself authentically. It's not about saying everything. To be able to stand fearlessly in front of one's own reflection is a holy feat. Being fully present does not necessitate volume, but rather space. At this point, the path starts to veer inward in a new direction. An unspoken but undeniable quality characterizes the 11th level of enlightenment. You start to experience the self as more than just a concept. It becomes a living axis inside you, not a role to be played, but an actual presence. According to Jung, the self is the mental framework that allows for the simultaneous consideration of opposing ideas without requiring their resolution. By this point, the self is no longer an abstract idea. It has become the pivot point. Rather of clambering up to it, you should let yourself sink into it like a leaf going down to its roots. Quietness is its arrival, not pyrotechnics. Not because things have calmed down on the outside, but because you have stopped pushing for them till a profound sense of inner security starts to take hold. A clarity has emerged behind the questions, and a quiet has descended beneath the din. There is less a need to defend, explain, and prove everything. A sense of calm confidence, born out of knowing oneself rather than everything, takes its place. When you quit trying to force results, coherent rather than chaotic, choices start to surface. Alternatively, you could manage or save life. You focus more on listening and less on responding. In the face of adversity, the self remains silent, like a compass pointing inward, rather than raising a voice to address the world around it. Feelings of grief, bewilderment, and anxiety may linger at this stage, but they will no longer consume you. There is now room, and in that room resides a holy thing, liberty. The liberty to reply instead of react, to keep one's heart open despite suffering, and to press on despite doubt. Not a definitive arrival, but the re-entry of the full psyche. This is what Jung called the essence of individuation. When we surrender control to someone greater, our egos become subservient. When that change happens, pain takes on a new form. Less personal and less severe it becomes. You are free from its control now. Your life starts to change, not flawlessly, but with completeness. You gracefully carry your paradoxes. You let things happen as they will, not trying to control or dominate the moment. Even in the midst of external upheaval, you can find solace in the knowledge that the ethereal self now lives within you. A subtle but significant insight starts to form inside you at this point. Your internal environment is inseparable from the outside world. It turns out that what was formerly just a coincidence is actually correspondence. The world around you starts to reflect your inner state, not in a robotic way, but as a live mirror that adjusts to the amplitude of your presence. The world we experience, according to Jung, is a reflection of our own thoughts and feelings. This is not to say that we create it, but rather that we view it through the prism of our own maturation. As you travel further into your reality, you start to feel like things are responding to you, not your ego or your superficial needs. Even though it's a little alteration, everything is different. When problems arise inside, you quit placing the blame on outside forces. Your role as an observer in the play of life's unfolding has been transformed. On the contrary, you assume your role as a collaborator in the creation of meaning rather than results. Your once shattered loss has transformed into a rite of passage. A delay that used to annoy you now feels like a shield. A new way of inhabiting yourself gives you a new perspective on the world. A compass is drawn by the mind. Your decisions are now guided by alignment rather than response. When you let go of your fears and behave with a steady awareness, the world starts to move to your beat, its own unique rhythm. This is more of a spiritual reciprocity than a game of control. You don't manipulate the world. You only observe it from a distance, fully alert. Everyone hears what you have to say. Life responds when you pay attention. You no longer carry the same wound that drew them in the first place, and the cycles that had been revolving around you start to break. Respect, not manipulation, characterizes co-creation. Knowing that your consciousness ripples through the fabric of existence like light across water is a profound realization. At this very instant, embodiment takes place with awakening. Instead of being seen as a performance, the inner transformation is starting to radiate as a movement toward truth. As you move, you start a dialogue, and with each breath, you make a contribution. You are actively engaging now, rather than merely waking up. Once you learn to remain motionless in the middle of a storm, rather than waiting for the clouds to part, the storm will eventually subside. Because you uncovered something more profound, rather than because you found all the answers, the hunt is no longer consuming you. Even the questions have changed. Lesions in the inner conflict start to fade. Rather than a battleground, the boundary between darkness and light, ego and soul, now feels like a hallowed meeting place. Things that used to feel disconnected are beginning to come together. The last step toward enlightenment is integration, which is best understood as a way of being rather than an endpoint. In this place, all of your rejected parts are finally at home. You no longer perceive an adversary when you gaze into your own reflection. Tenderness replaces shame, and deep terror replaces dread. Once concealed wounds now stand as barriers. Feel, embrace, and become conscious. Nothing needs fixing. Here, love emerges not as a feeling of approval or passion, but simply as being present. It is a vibration, a harmony between who you are and how you exist. Your value is no longer determined by how you compare to others. Put an end to letting other people define you. You know the hard work that went into getting here, so instead you hold yourself with a calm reverence. You are familiar with the penance that comes from withholding oneself and the release that follows your eventual return. According to Jung, the goal of individuation is not perfection, but rather completeness. That completeness encompasses beauty, brokenness, complexity, and contradiction. Moving forth while holding on to the things that hurt is what it entails. What this implies is that you can choose to live authentically, unfiltered, and unafraid of your own depth. Love is no longer an end in itself, but rather the organic outgrowth of a freed identity. Rather than marking the end, this serves as a gateway to something new. You face the spiral and its layers in a new way now, with a calmer spirit, a better vision, and a deeper breath. At last, you have awakened to the fact that you are no longer someone else. Rather, you are yourself again. If you felt moved by this message, continue reading. Continuing on with the path of recovery, development, and self-exploration is what the following video is all about. Who knows? It could be the spiritual breakthrough you've been seeking all along. Now is the time to tap into it. Subscribe, enable notifications, and become a part of a community dedicated to truth, transformation, and genuine personal growth. There are those who share your journey. In the following film, we'll meet again and keep on evolving into the perfect match we were born to be.